My name is Rebecca Tambs. I work at Deloitte in Australia. I'm going to be talking about our social network. So I'm the community manager of our network down in Australia. And today I'm going to talk a little bit, just a bit of background about the network. I'm going to be talking about some different stories. So I'm going to thread through the stories and talk about different use cases and just some of the enabling supports. And talk about where we're heading in the future. So Deloitte, you've probably heard about us. We're a big company. We look after tax, consulting, audit, a bunch of services. About 200,000 employees across the globe. And down in Australia, we've got about 6,000 people, just to give you an idea about size. So our social network, it started in 2008. So it's over 6 years old now, so it's probably one of the older networks around. And the kickoff of the network was actually in a small team. It was in our innovation team. And part of their job is really to try different technologies. And they started up with this social enterprise technology, and they started using it like a chat room. So it just started off with chat, what they're doing on the weekend, whatever. But then what happened was they started to see business and business conversations start to permeate through. It's quite interesting. So, themselves, they started, asking each other questions, helping on business, problems. And then what happened to take it to the next level? Well, our CEO, he was looking for a way to engage the organisation. They were basically going through like a rebrand and building an advertising campaign. So the CEO had a conversation with our head of digital at the time. His name was Pete Williams. And Pete said, look, let's send out a voicemail and let's get people to join up to the network. So, they had a few more conversations. They sent out the voicemail, and basically what they found, over the next few days, they had literally about 1,000 people join. So it was a real sort of step up, a way to get into, a level of adoption that was, something that you could work with. Basically from that, 1,000 members, they had about 38 groups and over 1,000 ideas for this marketing concept. So it was a lot of engagement. And there was CEO involved, marketing, a bunch of the teams involved to get that going. So great interactivity, really exciting, really engaging. So that was the story of how it sort of got to that next level. So I did promise stories. There's lots of stories today. If you're after technical conversation, there's not going to be any of that. I can promise you that. I'm not technical at all. Okay, so today, our network is 6 years old. I had a little birthday for us last year, so we had this little cake and all. So we've got over 5,000 members on the group, on the network. The message volume's about over 84,000 posts a year, very healthy for that size of organisation. The number of groups is about over 1,000, so it's a sizable number of groups. We have a methodology in Australia that we don't delete our groups. So that's something that we work with. We consider all the data to be valuable, so we don't go through deleting. So over 1,000 groups. I'm the community manager. I have about 2 hours a week at the moment, so something that we definitely want to build because we see the value in doing that right now. We also have support, so general IT support. We also have lots of crowdsourced support. So we actually have a group on our network to help new users and anyone who's got questions. We have a governance group. Obviously, it's really critical and was involved right from the beginning. And we just see, there's more need to do more across the board. More support, more admin, more community management. Because, this whole space, we all know, we've been here at the conference, this whole space is changing. There's so much we can also do just to support the adoption and use. So now I'm going to talk about a few more stories. The first use case is around team collaboration. I've got 2 stories to share. The first one was one of our most popular and prolific groups from business groups is actually from one of our tax teams in Melbourne. So when I say tax, I'm talking about our consultants that work with clients that help with tax advice. So typically you don't expect, tax accountants to be really, active on social, but actually they are one of our most popular business groups. What actually happened, they had a guy, I think, who used to work in IT, who joined their group, and so he had obviously himself quite a lot of expertise, and he was able to, get the leadership on board and show the value, and that group is, really going like hotcakes. So it's a great story for that team. They say that they share what they're working on, problems they're facing with their work. They share thought leadership, their annual leave, if they're going to have a cake in the office. So, it runs the gamut from business right through to, developing the social fabric within that team. And they say their leaders are, on there all the time, provide great support. And the culture they've built up is that everything there is on their social network. And that if there's new users or new members of the team, that they can literally see the history of that team. When people join the team, you don't send them a whole truckload of emails, do you? When people join, but on your social network, they can literally just click through and read it through themselves. And it's not just the business conversations that they can pick up there. They also pick up the culture of the team. And it's not something that we probably talk about too much. But, what do you say? What don't you say? How do you say it? Each team is different. And it's that social, immersion or into a team, which is really important. So it's something to think about. I guess, and when you talk about social, these are the things that you need to think about. It's not like another SharePoint site or something like that. This is actually about people. So they say they've cut their emails quite significantly and that their email is now less cluttered. Their email is now, more streamlined. They can see the conversations from their clients, which is like the really important conversations, right? And it enables them to be more responsive to those. So they say they're more connected and they're more productive overall. So that's a good story. That's our tax team in Melbourne. Now I've got another story about a client service team. So basically we have teams that form, they might be from like a tax group or from audit, or they could be across a number of different groups. So we had a particular team that formed for a particular client. And the story is that there were 10 weeks into a year-long engagement with a major client. And they had identified that the project team was having some communication issues. So the team leader decided to use the social network to try and improve the communication. There was people in Melbourne, people in Sydney, people in the client office. And so they say after 3 weeks of using social, they saw substantial improvements within the team. The team was posting contributions after client meetings, obviously the bits that they could share in that context. And then, it simplified their team onboarding, as we've talked about. And I'm having trouble with my mouse. There it goes. There it goes, back to life. And that they could pull up that whole history of the team as well. And the main return on investment for that group was their daily stand-up meeting. So I'm going to immerse you in some consulting talk here. So a lot of teams would have like a daily meeting, and they call it their daily stand-up. They literally stand up in a room to try and kind of get that meeting have it going quickly and get it over with. So they've moved that into social. You can now call it like a virtual stand-up meeting, right? by moving it in there, they've saved 30 minutes each day for all those client service team members. So literally they're able to add up the return on investment there. You just look at the charge out rates, do simple maths, and I'm not great at maths, and you can easily work out the ROI for that team, and that's what they've been able to do. And so the value then goes back into the organisation and to clients. So there's... Yeah, no, it's Melbourne, Sydney and client office. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about corporate comms, corporate communications. So, obviously really important role on our network, like other networks. They use the network as one of their communication channels. They use a calendar to help them run their program. And obviously I talked about the story before, our Green Dot campaign, that advertising campaign. They've run some of the big campaigns that provide that, I guess, that boost in usage that you just see periodically, and so that they're really successful at that. But I just want to, I guess, emphasise that they don't manage the content right across our network. Obviously, they provide great value in running these campaigns, but they're one voice on the network. They're not the only voice. So I just wanted to highlight that, because recently I have seen at different events a lot of social networks really focusing in on creating content plans. So I'm not so sure if that's something you're seeing here. But I guess I just want to emphasise the importance of having an open network, and for it to be seen as something that everyone can participate in kind of equally, and that there's not like one strong voice. Everyone is seen to have a role. So something I just want to emphasise. I'm not sure if you've seen that phenomenon here. Let's just try. So the next one is seeking help and asking questions. This is obviously a natural kind of use that you can find on your social networks. I've been talking about our Australian network. We're just going to flick here and talk about our global network just for a moment, because obviously it's a much larger group, and I just wanted to emphasise a couple of points. So it's obviously one of the largest social networks. I belong to a number of groups on that network. One of them is our knowledge management group, and that's got over 5,000 members. And the SharePoint group, if you're in Rob's session earlier, he was talking about that. That's got over 3,000 members. So just think about that. When you post questions in there, you've got a high probability of getting your questions answered. And that actually is a reality, because I use that all the time. I mean, sometimes I mention certain people in the room to help me with questions. But it's a really great way of getting help when you need it. There's also that diversity aspect. So when you're talking, big sizes, you're obviously getting a range of opinions. So, the whole thing about email, you just email who you know. We've heard that from a number of people today in the conference. With posting to a group, you might get responses from people A, you don't know, B, you didn't expect to hear from, and they might add a whole different kind of element to the question that you hadn't thought of. So there is a lot of value in diversity. So responsiveness to questions is really important. It's a great, if you're responsive, you build trust, and trust is how you build the environment for knowledge sharing. And we're talking about knowledge that really matters, not just sharing, tidbits, but actually the bits that really matter. And as a community manager, I see the need to provide like a safety net, particularly on our main feed. If there's questions that are going unanswered, typically you'll see people, helping out some of our, super users. But I think to highlight the importance of a role, especially in networks that are trying to grow, if you're in those early stages. But I still see the need today for us in providing a safety net. And what it does is it helps to sustain the trust, right? So you're trying to build that trust. If you have a safety net, then people feel, yes, actually my question might get answered, even if it's just by Rebecca. She'll have a go. Yes.
We do some work with another set of Big Four accountancy firms.
Yes.
And they use knowledge bases as well.
Yes.
But one of the concerns, the big concerns they have, is that the answers they get given are by people who are qualified to give them.
Mm-hmm.
And the trouble with a fairly open network is you don't necessarily know whether that person you've got a response from is
Sure.
relatively qualified. I mean, okay, there's a peer review.
Sure.
But how do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, I think that's user education. I mean, I think that's just everything isn't about work. You go to Google, which search results do you trust? It's that authoritative information. Yeah. In our people systems, there's ways of identifying experts. If you're a regular user of a group, you might get to know the different members, the ones who are, I guess, super users, and ones with a lot of expertise. So, yeah, I guess encourage people to kind of get into the groups, and you can often see who has different levels of expertise. And then you might see debates between people too, which is kind of nice. There might be different opinions. So I take on board what you're saying, but I think that there's still value in different opinions, but you're not going to get in a social network. You're not going to say, no one's going to say that's the authoritative answer. So you're not going to have someone provide that. I guess it's up to the users. Absolutely, we do. Yep. Yeah.
Rebecca, so you said you're a community manager?
Yes.
The internal structure for Deloitte and how you manage that, are you in charge of all those groups for that whole region, for the Australian region? I'm just trying to get a picture of how Deloitte has structured the management responsibilities of the community.
Yeah, 2 hours a week. I'm not in all the. I can promise you, I'm not in all the groups. It's very much. If you set up a group, you've obviously got a responsibility around being a group administrator to keep that group alive. But groups come and go, and it's sort of sometimes it's like a natural cycle. Of use of a group, and that's okay. Other groups are really important for particular business units. They really do need continuous love and nurturing. So not my role to be across everything. There's thousands of groups, not possible, well, over 1,000 groups. But the super users, they provide a lot of that support as well. I think it's up to everybody to make it work.
So following on from that, do you give sort of community kind of management training to those?
Would like to do more. Can say that.
In order to do your good work.
Yeah, I can talk about some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about a bit about what we have done, but we want to do more. So we talked about being a safety net. I wanted to talk about just an example of getting those questions answered. So someone asked on the network, on the main feed, does anyone know an engineer, right? And so I picked it up and went into our people system, did a search and found some answers and posted them out. Then our CEO, I'll just highlight that, our CEO then responded and said, actually our Chief Strategy Officer is also an engineer. So that just demonstrates a number of things. He took time out of his day to help another user. He's obviously showing us all how it's done. Right? He's showing, setting a really great example for how we should all act on social networks. So not bad for CEOs. So we talk a lot about CEOs posting, CEOs liking, but how many are actually helping and responding to? Yeah. Okay, ideas. So great place for idea sharing. One of the stories we've got is there were some young developers who created a new vision for one of our internal systems, and they shared this out on the social network. And there was a lot of debate and controversy about what they did. It was quite controversial. But one of the great aspects of the network and the culture is the ability for us to have that debate. and then for the participants to be civil, and then the senior leaders came in and acted on the feedback and resolved it. What actually happened is they then developed a developer sandpit. So when different users are on the bench, they're not committed on a client engagement, they could then go in and take the next task that was sort of sitting there on the sandpit to do. So it was a great way for the particular number of the young ones who wanted to be in there doing new stuff and creating some new ideas around some of the core systems and things like that. That was a way for them to be able to do that and give them the freedom. I'm going to talk about praise and recognition. So one of our teams developed a whole program around using recognition. This particular team were not regular users of the network at the time. And 2 junior members, they assume roles of innovation and leading innovation within their business unit. And they saw an opportunity to increase the connectivity and building a culture. Now what they've done is that they've developed like a recognition program using the social network. So, showing some recognition to different team members. What's actually happened is it's increased the awareness of different projects happening. We're talking multi-location across Australia, etc. So it's also a celebration of individual and team efforts. So it's really helped them build their culture, and the networks help with that. So that's been another a nice story that we've got. So I'm now going to talk about social, because we are talking about social networks. So social is an important part of our relationships at work, and this is no different on our social networks. We had some research that a number of people are aware of that was done by the University of Sydney, and I've got the details here. Obviously the decks I think are going to be shared out. Actually, you can just Google University of Sydney, Deloitte, Australia, and you'll find the research. We're actually in the process of updating that, and there will be some updated research come out. I'm not sure when, but soon, hopefully. So that research talked about different breakdowns of use of the network. So ideas at 6%, sharing at 15%, problems and advice at 13%, updates at 14%, discussions at 38%, and other 2%. Social and praise came out at 12% as a bundle, and pure social, 3.8%. So this is a couple of years ago now, 2012, and the data was probably a little bit earlier than that. So so that's sort of social. That's where it's sitting on our network right now, and probably you could say that we're open at our doors to provide that research. That's probably interesting in itself. So there's a range of social groups. So Rob mentioned a few this morning on global, but on Australia we've got employee classifieds, we've got Deloitte Music, we've got a book club group, Deloitte Rugby Banter, which is not my thing, rugby, but there's guys having debates about rugby matches and stuff all the time. There's an Android group, and they're always having fights with the iPhone guys. There's a Deloitte Mums and Dads group, which is really great. This is for new mums and dads. There's lots of questions and everyone helping each other. And the Brisbane Social Committee. So these are just a few, but it's really important, a different range of groups there. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give you in a second our most famous thread and most long-standing thread, and our most recent group, and Rob had mentioned it this morning as Awa, so I'm coming to that. And absolutely, the stickiness. Our view is we need to get everyone in there. We absolutely need to balance. That's why I'm saying 3.8%. The rest of it is business, right? So it's really important for executives to understand that as well. You know, there's different, you know, levels of acceptance around these things. So around, you know, how much social. So, you know. No, it's not that much, no. So we believe that social threads as well, so we've talked about some groups, the threads are valuable to bring in more reserved members, right? So we say readers, we don't say lurkers, okay? Because I don't know if you hear these terms, but some people say the people who just like log on and read, they call them lurkers. We don't use that term, we say readers. Because just one thing to think about, you don't really know what those people are doing off the network. So they read something, they then went and had a conversation at the water cooler. You can't capture that usage. So this is something to be aware of. You don't really know, you know, how they're using that information. So these help us build the social fabric by building a safe and trusted environment. So it's, you know, it's building relationships is what you know, you have to build a trusted relationship to share information, to share knowledge. And having these social groups helps you do that. It helps you just build those relationships at work. So I mentioned the balance, it's really critical, business and social. So our most famous thread, I've promised this, it's called the Great Scone Debate. Now, I know you guys here in London are really into your scones. I didn't think we were in Australia until we had this thread. This thread has been going since December 2001. So that's like 3.5 years, three and a half years, over 300 posts. And so what this is all about was our Chief Marketing Officer was having a debate with his PA about whether the jam goes on top of cream on a scone or vice versa. And this has totally consumed us in Australia. We perhaps should have talked to our UK colleagues. And I think actually that's what happened. Everyone kind of just like phoned their grandma or whatever and got, you know, all these sort of authoritative things came in from, you know, various web sources and relatives about what actually should be happening there. So this thread has become quite legendary. And we find that a number of teams, when they get a new team member, they actually invite them into the thread. So they'll like mention them in. So we see that happen all the time. Or, you know, they just use it as part of their induction. And it's just showing our playful culture. That, so we like to say we've got a playful culture with serious intent. So that, yeah, this is obviously a good example of that. So I'm going to talk about Azazawa. Yes, I can't even say that group name. So if you're in Rob's session, he mentioned it a little bit this morning. So this group was the result of a pocket dial fail. So we had a senior leader, he had his mobile in his pocket, and none of us knew that it was actually possible, but he created a group. Like, it was like, oh, you can create a group from your mobile? Well, apparently you can. We all found out about that. So it's actually one of our most popular social groups, and it's like a real chill out space for us. There's like funny GIFs and videos, and we like to reference old ones like the Scone Debate and other things as well. So Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Seinfeld are some of the favourite things, and just everything gets overlaid. It's a real creative space. It's been adopted by a number of our super users, so it's just a way to keep them really heavily engaged. And also we're seeing new team members joining and senior leaders participating. So you might be surprised about that, but we actually have senior leaders participating too. We've actually had a number of other threads. We had another debate about bring back Spotify. I think we IT guys were, you know, had some bandwidth troubles one day, and Spotify was on the list. And yeah, so it's just lots of debates like that. So it's a really healthy culture. So I'm going to talk about some enablers. And the first one is early adopters. So a number of our team members have made social part of their FAME agenda. So we've got people from HR, marketing, the C-suite, legal, innovation, our digital teams, and I work in knowledge. All of these people, they all talk at their own industry conferences, and social is a really big part of that. So it's become part of a number of people's fame agenda across the organisation. It's fascinating. So these early adopters, I see them as like the backbone, and they're always users who'll jump in and willing to help other people. So, great people. Executive support, we always hear about it, but how important is it? So important. So our previous CEO, his name was Guillaume Swigers. He became one of the best known CEOs in Australia in relation to his support and his use of social media. He posted numerous YouTube videos around his use and the company's use of social. And one of our other execs, Pete Williams, who I talked about before, very well known in social media circles on Twitter, etc. Our new CEO, Cindy Hook, and our new exec team are very engaged with the platform as well. And some of the ways that senior execs show their support, we talked about, getting input for town hall presentations, showing that they actually, want to talk about what we want to hear about. Liking posts from juniors right through to senior members, responding to posts, showing that they're interested and engaged, and obviously posting themselves. And hearing the execs talk about the value that they get from social, getting opinions and information right from the coalface, and using the channel as a way to amplify their own communications. So governance, a number of talks about governance today. I'll throw in a little bit. So we have a steering committee. It was formed right from the beginning. Our risk team were given their own group right from the early days, and they found it so indispensable they couldn't deny it for anyone else. So I've heard a number of people talk at different sessions, and this is a real area that's challenging around how to get the risk teams involved. So they got their own group, and our legal counsel was also the leader of our steering committee. So she got very comfortable with social, and she set up a framework with simple guidelines on how we can use it, what's possible, where the boundaries were. And so, our whole organisation became comfortable, right? So I think that's a good example of how you can get over that sort of governance hump, which I've heard other organisations facing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about awareness and training. And we had, a year or two ago now, we had like a road show that went around Australia. And it was not just it wasn't just internal social, it was also Twitter and external social as well. We had like a digital reverse mentoring program. So basically, there's all this terminology. There's the digital dinosaurs, right? Our senior leaders who weren't born with digital, who were very keen to get on board, they were coupled with junior members of the firm, our digital natives, the young ones, and basically converting the dinosaurs into the digital immigrants. So this is running back a few years ago now, but it was a really important campaign, right? So I feel like we're going into, retro talk here, but still, it was really important at the time. And we also had a playbook. So, this was like a kind of a package put together for different teams and how they could get the most out of the network. So that was really useful as well. The guys who were the digital natives, they formed a group called the Posse. So we have these kind of groups, right? So these are our social champions. So we don't just give them an ordinary name. They had this name called the Posse, right? It has connotation, right? So very much a group of champions. They formed their own private group. On there, they're obviously sharing their own collaboration tips and tricks and advice on particular situations, right? So that group is still ongoing. We're looking how we can, we're obviously where we are as social now, more advanced. Still we're thinking, okay, maybe, we'll kickstart that campaign. So something we're thinking about. So that mentoring program, obviously win-win. So not the senior leaders, obviously, they got to learn all about social. The junior leaders, the junior members of the team, they obviously got to sit in senior leader offices and develop relationships, raise their profile. So that was a win-win program. So it was a good one. Talk for a little bit about analytics and external research. So I mentioned before about this University of Sydney research. We also do quite a bit of research. We've got a number of in-house experts who are looking over the data. And it's really just a wealth of information there to draw insights from our business. And my predecessors in this community manager role, very skilled in analytics. So I'm lucky now I've got other team members who have that deep expertise. So we're currently looking how we can build additional capability, because there's this, obviously, to leverage this amazing data asset for the benefit of the business. So talk a little bit about the future. So I think it's mostly adoption and doing more. So integrating right from day one, more help guides, more community management, more time for advisory in teams. So just helping each team how they can get the most out of it, and helping them work through any barriers. And helping to develop our product and service that we deliver to customers. So we need to innovate. We're in this world of digital disruption. Innovating our product is so important. So, how can we leverage our network effectively to help with that business challenge? We need dedicated resources, so more resources to help there. More integration on the intranet, and we know all that space is changing. And sharing the success stories. So even just the process of doing this presentation, I've collected some more stories, so sharing them back out and just collecting and sharing stories is so important. So today, some of the use cases we've been through, and these are not exhaustive at all. Team collaboration, corporate comms, seeking help, asking questions, praise, recognition, and social. The enablers, early adopters, exec support, governance, awareness and training, analytics, and external research. So these aren't by any means all of them, it's just a selection for today. So I just want to leave you with the main takeaway, that these ecosystems help us deliver benefits to the organisation across all these different use cases. And ultimately, these are the components that can help us be successful. And we consider this to be like a differentiator for us. Like if we do social really well, we really believe this is a differentiator. So we put a lot of effort and emphasis on this. So I think all of us have the opportunity to find the use cases in our own organisations which can add value, and the catalysts which will help support your adoption. So I'm looking forward to hearing other people's stories. So hopefully you might stay and share a few after the presentation. So thanks everybody. If you like, others can leave, or maybe we can have a quiet couple of convos up the front. But thanks everyone. I hope everyone's enjoyed the conference, because I think this is kind of last session. So I should sort of say something like, hope you've had fun. And let's all connect on social. So thanks everybody. Thanks for today. Cheers.